Hello and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn session. For those of you who don't know, my name is Ricki Lynée and I am Seed&Spark's Film Community Manager, and I will be moderating today's conversation. But before we get into it, we would first like to acknowledge that the land that we are all on is occupied territory. I am currently moderating this event from Ute land. So please check the YouTube live comments feed or the video description for a link to a First Nations COVID relief fund and an amazing app that will tell you exactly whose land you are currently watching this event from. So if you aren't familiar with Seed&Spark, we are a platform built to support creators by providing tools wherever they are in their creator journey, from crowdfunding and education to creative distribution approaches. But that's not what you guys are here for today. Today, you want to learn how to write yourself on screen. So why don't we invite our wonderful panelists up to join us? And as they are joining us, please be aware that if you are watching this live video, you can be submitting questions at any time. So if you have questions for our awesome panelists, please feel free to put those in the comments section, and I will be moderating them throughout the event. So welcome all of you. Let's start with a series of introductions. So if you guys could go around and tell me who you are and what you make, that'll be a good first starting point. So River, why don't you go first?
I'll start. Hello, my name is River Gallo. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm a writer, director, actor, and intersex activist, and I'm the director, writer, and star of Ponyboi, which is in the background. I didn't plan that. It's just been there, but yeah, nice to be here.
Very, very cool. And Tim?
Yeah, hi. My name is Tim Manley, he, him, and I'm the writer, director, and actor in The Feels. And it's a web series about a bi guy with a lot of emotions. It's very nice to be here with everyone.
All right, and Ricki.
Hi guys, I'm Ricki Lynée. I'm an actress, writer, and producer. I am the co-owner and head of development of Nuanse Entertainment, executive producer of feature-facing films, and I co-wrote, produced, and edited the series The Retreat, which also is right over here.
Such good background plugs. I'm loving the production design of this workshop, of this panel that we're doing today. So yeah, we've got a panel of multi-hyphenates today. So if you want to know anything about how a movie gets made, these are the three people to talk to about it. So because we're having essentially a conversation about representation and how we sometimes must take matters into our own hands for better or worse, I'm curious if you guys could go around and let me know if this is something that you've experienced. When was the first time you saw yourself on screen, if ever? Ricki, why don't you go first on this one?
Wow, the first time I saw myself, I was in college. One of my first short films, and I was so excited. I remember being like, okay, I'm an actress. I'm super excited about finally pursuing this. And someone in the film department, I went to Brooklyn College in Flatbush, Brooklyn. And one of the film majors, because I studied theater there, one of the film majors reached out looking for actors. And it was a sexy kind of comedy about a woman who meets a man and is super excited about this date. And I just remember how silly and ridiculous my character was and being excited because I'm like, okay, this is my time to prove that I'm an actress. and I remember watching it for the first time. And I was like, oh my gosh, these are such sexy, mature scenes. And my family's going to see this and me in this role. And I was kind of nervous about what they would say, but also really prepared to go on my whole spiel. Like, this is what I'm going to do. So you guys should be get ready to see me in all kinds of roles. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't a huge screening. It was like a link on YouTube, and I was with my family when they watched it, and I was like, so yeah. And
That's
of course,
a fun experience.
yeah, and I criticized myself for all sorts of things. I was like, man, I should have did my makeup different, and my voice sounds weird, and all sorts of things. But I just remember being like, okay, this is going to be a lot to get used to. But it was like very thrilling and nerve-wracking.
That's awesome. So I love that story. I should have clarified that what I meant was on like somebody like seeing yourself represented on screen by other characters. So like what was the first piece of media, if there was one, where a character on screen made you see yourself? Like, oh, I feel represented by this depiction, and you know, interpret that however you will.
Well, I will say that one of the first times that I felt like I saw myself on screen was it's specific to Halle Berry's acceptance speech when she won Best Supporting Actress as the first Black woman. And I remember sitting in my living room and thinking, wow, this is so amazing. And what an accomplishment. And remembering how important it was for me to see her.
Had you seen the movie that she was accepting the award for, or you just saw the acceptance speech?
No. I saw the movie the year before. And I was so excited because I saw her getting the award. I saw people appreciate her work, and I was like, wow, this is so fantastic. This is what I want to do as an actress. And I think for me then, it kind of opened up my interest in exploring more film and the possibility of even becoming a filmmaker. I think I kind of I tiptoed around the idea because I felt really strongly about being an actress, but I think the idea of creating opportunities for other Black actresses out there stemmed from that point.
Very cool. Tim, what about you? Any early memories of feeling like you were seen through someone else's lens?
You know, it's strange because I think to some extent, growing up as a cis white guy, to some extent, I always saw myself on screen, right?
Sure.
But I don't think I ever specifically saw a bisexual guy on screen. I just didn't happen to see it. At least not before I came out and started telling those stories myself. So it's weird. I think to some extent, a lot of parts of who I am, I got to see, and I felt very seen. And yet I think because that one aspect was sort of lacking, maybe it took me longer to even really notice it or know what to think about it.
Yeah, that's, I think, an experience that a lot of people can relate to, myself included. There are 5 canonically asexual characters in all of film and television, and none of them existed before 2016. So no wonder I didn't know that was an option until I was 22. River, what about you? Have you felt like you've seen yourself represented in any way in media before you started making it?
Similar to Tim, yeah, I felt similarly that I don't think I necessarily have. I think the closest to the first time I was like, whoa, that is the closest person that I've seen to me was Ezra Miller in Perks of Being a Wallflower in 2012 when that came out. I remember actually I was in New York at the time, going to NYU, and I saw they were on the cover of Paper Magazine, and I was wearing red lipstick that day, and then they were wearing red lipstick, and I was just like, and I picked up this copy, and I was just like, oh my god, who are they? What is going on? Is that me? But so I think that was the first time I experienced seeing someone who was gender fluid or queer, but as an intersex and non-binary person, I've never seen anybody in a narrative space that was that.
And that's why we're all here today. Like, I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to you three, but I'm devastated that this is the reason why we have to have this conversation, because it's
Yeah.
so rare for, so many different types of people to get to authentically see themselves on screen, particularly in a nuanced way and not in like a stereotyped or, fetishized way. So with that, with telling your own stories, I'm curious, and Ricki, you've kind of already talked about this, but when did you all know that you wanted to tell stories, and did you always intend to act in those stories, or did the acting part come as a result of like, well, I think I'm the most authentic person for this? Whoever wants to take that one first.
I'll take it. I think acting was always like the thing that first got me into just being an artist. Like I did musicals and theater in high school, and then went to college thinking I wanted to do musical theater as well, but that didn't happen. I ended up doing experimental theater, which then led me to go into screen acting. And so at a foundation, like I am an actor, but then when I started, this is in 2012, 2013, when I started meeting managers and agents, they just like couldn't like place me. And this was like right when Orange is the New Black just started coming on TV, and like Laverne Cox was like just starting to like be part of the like, popular culture, and trans narratives were just starting like to be a part of the zeitgeist. So I felt like, non-binary was just kind of like light years away, and it's amazing what's happened in the last 10 years. But yeah, so I just felt like the industry didn't know what to do with me. And they recognized that I was talented, but that they just didn't know what roles would be right for me. So that's when I decided that, I have to write my own things and train behind the camera as much as I trained in front of the camera.
Yeah, Ricki, it sounds like that was similar to your experience. Both of you came specifically as actors and decided it's time for me to take control of my own narrative.
Yeah. Like I was saying, I had been studying acting since I was like in my preteens. I was like 12 years old when I took my first acting class. And then when I got to college, I started to discover theater and how amazing theater can be. It wasn't until I graduated college that I got my first film gig, working with my now business partner of 10 years. And it was with one of our first projects where she actually offered, her name is Ashley Denise, and she is the artistic director and founder of Nuanse Entertainment. And when we started talking about my character for our web series back in 2012, anthology, was when I kind of felt like I had some say into like who I wanted this character to be. And I felt prior to that I really wanted to explore what it would mean to provide opportunities for other people that look like me. And when I got that opportunity to kind of talk about the character, I was like, this is amazing. I want to do more of this. And since then, we have been working towards creating and contributing to a new narrative of the Black experience. Of course, that means without stereotype. And a lot of our work is to do exactly that. It is to create characters that we feel work for us, as opposed to what has been given to us over how many decades in the industry. So yeah, that was kind of like my intro, acting, and then I donned my filmmaker hat circa 2013.
Very cool. And Tim, what about you?
Definitely not from acting. I think I considered myself a fiction writer for a while. but I would sometimes get on stage and tell stories, true stories from my life, like at the Moth in New York or at other storytelling shows around town. And in 2015, I did a solo show that was just me telling stories for like an hour, largely about being bi. And maybe a year later, I think in 2016, one of my friends, Najee Latayad, who you know, Brie, he's a photographer and a filmmaker, and we were friends, and we just wanted to collaborate on something. And he had seen this solo show, and he basically thought the stories were worth sharing. And it was curious, maybe because the stories were largely or a lot about me being bi, and he's not. And that was interesting that it resonated with him so much. And we just started filming things kind of on a whim, and it kind of developed somewhat accidentally into this web series. But I would say maybe when you're a multi-hyphenate person, there's always one of those hyphenates at least that you're just struggling to try to fill. Maybe one comes most naturally to you and one you're stretching for. And especially at the beginning, I would say the acting portion of things I was really stretching for.
So why did you decide to cast yourself? Was it just like logistics, like, well, they're my stories, I may as well be the one telling them, or was, did you ever consider having a different person portray you?
I had the time and I was free. I didn't cost money and I was available.
You were the perfect budget choice.
Yeah. So
that's fair. Well, Tim, I'm glad you brought up Najee, because I know obviously your creative partnership has been really important to you. And Ricki, you have a creative partner. River, I'm curious to hear about you. But yeah, for those of you who have creative partners or have collaborated with people on the projects that are really personal to you, I'm curious, like, what it has been like to collaborate with people whose experiences are not your own, and how you sort of find the truth even when, like, it's authentic to you, but it may not be authentic to them specifically. Like, how have you navigated collaboration when telling deeply personal stories?
Yeah, well, I'll say I think generally it's so important to find people to collaborate with that are like-minded, that are interested in the work that you do and have the same values. I think that for our partnership with Ashley and myself, especially over the last 10 years, while we don't have the same experience, we have the same motivation, we have the same goal, and we love what we do. We love filmmaking. We love seeing interesting, new, and captivating Black characters on screen. And I think we celebrate that we have our own unique and rich lives and experiences that we can pour into these characters. So for a lot of the work that we've done, we'll be in the writer's room and we're talking about, like, that is such an interesting point, that theme that you're talking about specifically of having a mentor who does not have the same background as you, how you felt about that. I can relate, because I had a piano teacher who was like a father figure to me. And like, it was hard to explain to people that this middle-aged Korean man had so much in common with a 16-year-old Black girl from Queens, and the thread being, like, the through line being music. And bouncing those ideas off of each other is really kind of like the meat of a lot of our work. And also aspiring to see ourselves in roles that we haven't seen before is a lot of what we do, especially when we're writing and creating new characters. So yeah, it's I think that if you can collaborate with a group or one other individual that can help bounce ideas off of you to kind of keep things new and to challenge you in ways, and being open to that, I think, is so important. being receptive to, new ideas and even like challenges in a way that kind of force you to explore and elaborate on what you're looking to see, what you're looking to do, I think is so incredibly helpful. And I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I think that the piece about like how collaboration sort of shows you that things that you take for granted about your own experience might actually be the most interesting parts of the story can be a really important factor in getting people from many different perspectives. So River, what about you? What has been your experience in collaborating on deeply personal projects to you, and how have you navigated that process?
Yeah, I similarly have a group of amazing filmmakers that I go to as my go-to team for Ponyboi. My best friend Sade Clark and Joseph, she co-directed with me, and then our good friend Kristen Laffey was a producer, and our other friend Seven Graham was also a producer, and so it kind of made like this bubble of like safety in which it can be easier, at least, to be vulnerable and to be to go in those darker, scary places. But that being said, similar to Ricki, like it. We're not all the same, even though, Sade's Jamaican and first generation immigrant parents. My parents are from El Salvador, but are also first generation. But we have that like cross racial kind of like, dialogue that we could have with each other. And Seven is intersex, and as am I, but Seven's white and from England, and like Kristen is queer but from California. So we all have like our different take, but we're all not cis white men, I guess. There's nothing wrong with cis white men.
Don't worry, Tim. We like you here. It's fine.
But I always have a good rule of thumb, like there should always be at least one token white guy on a set, as the diversity hire.
It's important to give those guys some opportunities. They've been suffering.
I love making sets, reflective of like my life and reflective of like my family and the people that I've grown up with, and also to give opportunities to people. So I find that really important as part of not just collaboration, but for me to give back the privilege of being able to make films and being able to make, art, to invite people who normally aren't allowed into those spaces, like I once felt.
And Tim, what about you?
River, I think the phrase that I think you use, this really beautiful phrase of like the bubble of safety or something like that you said, because filmmaking is a collaborative medium, so it'd be pretty tough to do every single role yourself. And so I think one of the most important things, at least in my experience with the fields, has been creating that bubble of safety, right? And that the people that you bring on all have that same feeling in mind. And with us, there are two things specifically that come to mind. One is that in our most recent season, we brought on our producer, Camden Elizabeth, had a big role in creating that bubble of safety, right? And making sure everyone on crew, everyone who comes there that day really wants to create the same sort of vibe, and if that means she brings brownies for everyone to have a treat, if it means maybe before certain heavy takes, everyone takes like a deep breath together, right? It's really getting that energy in the air just right. And the other thing that I think of is a lot of episodes of The Fields have been co-written with the other actors who were in them, either beforehand or to some extent a little bit improvised on the spot. But largely, most of the time, the other person in the scene has a great say in what their character will be saying. And the way that happens often is that we're talking about the scene or what we're going to do, or someone's sharing their actual personal experience with something, and then the other person goes, and just sort of responds affirmatively, and that's when like, oh, okay, wait, this might be a thing. This is something that we can connect on. And so, yeah, I just think that feeling is what it's all about.
Absolutely. Yeah. So much of collaboration is just making people feel safe to collaborate. It's not just you hire somebody to do a job, you hire them and then make sure that they feel safe enough to contribute to the process creatively in whatever way makes sense for them. And so much of that starts at the top. So it's lovely to hear that you all are prioritizing that for yourself as well as your collaborators. And so something else that I'm curious about, because you're all performers, I'm curious on a logistical side, like who tends to be directing when you are on camera? Is it you? Do you have like one other person on set that kind of watches your back? Do you tend to try and separate the actor director parts? Like what is the staffing look like on that side when you are like specifically performing on camera?
I'd say for me, it is definitely, I have a phenomenal partner, and she is a great director. And I am so glad that she can direct me specifically when it's stories and characters that I've written and we've written together. Mostly because I think that Tim mentioned it before, but like we are mostly, like many of us are multi-hyphenate. So we wear many hats. And I think it is helpful in the collaborative sense to have that safety and that trust with your team. And I trust her wholeheartedly. So she wears the director hat when I'm acting, because I feel like I will be too critical of myself in many ways. And because of our years of working with each other, she already knows what I'm looking for. So I trust her to relay that to me. And it's incredibly helpful. So, yeah.
For me as well, or for Ponyboi, I trust Sade to direct me so much, and just love her vision. And it's a lot about also in development and in pre-production, making sure that things are planned and that we know what we're going to do, and building structures so that when we get into it, we can play. When I've directed things on my own, and also acted in them without a co-director, I usually have like a good producer who ends up kind of directing me as well. Like it's hard to build that muscle as directing yourself as in acting, because you have to really throw yourself in there as an actor, and the director is kind of like the counterpart, like opposite to that. So it's like to really do it well, you need either an outside eye or just to really build that muscle of being able to have the freedom to do what the character needs to do, and then objectively, go back and see if like that was the right thing to do.
Sure.
Yeah. And I would just say the same. You need that other person, and in my case, we have our co-director Najee. We're co-directors, so we share that role, and our producer Camden plays a huge role as well. And I think the word that is most important to me is just trust. That you can really, really trust whoever is watching that monitor or watching through the camera, to see what the show needs, and that they can help you get there. Yeah.
So all three of you brought up trust, which I think is super, super important, but it's also kind of an abstract phrase. So I'm curious, especially in like these clearly very intense and like collaborative relationships that you've all formed over the course of your projects, like what were the things that built trust? Like, do you have a story that you can tell us about a moment where you realize like, this is my ride or die person, I will follow them into the sun? Like when did you realize that you implicitly trusted this person to help you tell stories from a deeply personal nature?
There was a moment when we were making Ponyboi with Sade. Well, there was two moments. There was one right before our first day of shooting. We were shooting in New Jersey, and I don't know. And she was, because we were staying at my house in my parents' house in New Jersey, and I like went into the guest room where she was staying, and I was like, I'm nervous. And then she like sat down, and like we held hands, and she started like praying, like just like asking God for like grace and strength to like be able to do this. And it was just such a beautiful moment of really like connecting and grounding. And then a few days later, when we shot in LA, there was a moment where like I just literally like everything was so overwhelming, and I just like, we were shooting in a laundromat, and there was like a lot of extras and kids, and like I just like left set and went to the parking lot, and like just like, oh, and I was like really pissed that like they got Subway for dinner, and like there wasn't a gluten-free option, and like I was just like couldn't eat anything.
Just a lot of things were going on. Nothing was going right.
A lot of hanger mostly. And then I went to the parking lot, and I laid down, and then Sade was like, River, you can't leave set. Like you're like literally the director and like the star of this. Like you need to set an example. And then I was like, I know, but she was like, do you need food? And then she like ordered me some like rice and beans, and then like, and I had a Diet Coke, and I felt like so much better. But it was that moment of like, you know, being soft and gentle with me, but also like snapping me out and being like, hey, like, you know, you got to get your shit together. Like it was a night shoot. We had like limited hours. Like we need to like get this done. And that was, I think, a moment where I was just like, yeah, I could really trust her.
That's really fun. What about Ricki, Tim? Any stories about like when you realize, yes, this is the person that I want to work with. This is a space that I feel safe in.
I mean, I've had those moments so many times with Ashley, because we've been working for several years together on several different projects. But I think more specifically on our most recent project, the retreat. And I think just to piggyback off of what River said and what Tim was talking about, as far as like safety on set for the retreat, what we set out to do was to create a series that was developed entirely with all Black women cast and crew. And we were very successful with that. And so every time being on set, it was just like, we all felt really like safe. And it was like a sacred experience, because it was like, wow, this feels like it's never been done before. We were so excited to finally be able to have this dream come true, but share this experience all the time, like all 10 days on set. And in her and my personal relationship, I've always been able to gauge when is a good time to kind of like focus on outside things. Like, I think it's kind of prioritizing what to discuss on set, because we've worn this hat so many times. We know when's a good time to chime in and be like, we got to figure out something because we're a little low on some food right now. We got to feed our cast and crew. And then figuring out, okay, well, I know she's already busy doing this. I can use my, free time to kind of explore this or delegate responsibilities. And I think specifically on the retreat, there were moments where we were short on time and we really had to move because we had a company move to Brooklyn. And I had a moment and I had to come up and figure out like what is a great way to kind of speed things up, but also make this next appointment so that we don't miss shooting in this fabulous radio station. And I had to think on my toes, and I came in and I told her, like, I was able to think the way that I know she would want to think, and then flesh out with an answer, like a solve. And I kind of came up with something. I feel like on film, you really like, when you're a filmmaker, and an independent filmmaker at it, you really got to think on your toes and come up with elaborate excuses when you're in crunch time specifically. But I was able to channel Ashley and I was like, what would she do? I know she's busy. I need to give her the time. What would she do? And I ended up coming up with this, like, our car broke down. Can you please push this? Can we please push this
So
appointment to like an hour later?
So it was a clever story that you told so that you could get your
yes,
shot.
I was like, I need to channel all of the clever and wit of Ashley Denise, and she was like, "You handled it. You're good. You know what? This is why you my girl." And we have those moments all the time on set. So yeah, that was one moment that I think reinforced why we are like business partners and like friends for so long.
Cool. What about you, Tim? When did you know Najee was the one?
So many times, but really, I mean, there was one specifically that feels relevant. I think I'd said that when we started the show, the actor portion of the hyphenate was the real reach for me. And I remember on our very first day of filming, we had just shot a few ideas for scenes, and especially looking back on it, I know they weren't amazing. And I think even that day, I felt like this wasn't quite what I was hoping it would be. And then the last thing we were shooting that day was, it required me to be relatively emotional or to inhabit a certain space. And we did a few takes, and I don't think it was quite coming through. And Najee pulled me into the other room and said some sort of magic words. And basically what he did was he gave me permission to go there. And I think in addition to this word trust, maybe that this word permission feels very important to me. I think especially if you're telling stories or trying to go to a certain place stories that don't get told much, or to a place that you're not quite sure if it's okay for you to go, or if anyone else would like you to go there. Permission feels really important. And he sort of asked me to go there, let me go there, and I felt safe to go there in front of him. And it was, quite frankly, somewhat life-changing. And I think I asked him to send me that footage like that night. And then the next morning, I think I rewatched that take several times in a row and just sort of stared at my face. And I was like, so that's what I really look like when I really go, like when I really feel that way. And it kind of shook me. And I obviously couldn't have done it on my own. And I couldn't have done it with someone else. So.
Yeah, finding someone who you're not self-conscious around is so important in a collaborator, but a director specifically, especially if you're telling a very personal story, or like Tim and I, you were not initially comfortable with acting. And it is really, really important to feel like you're not making a fool of yourself. This is what you are allowed to do. Permission is a lovely word, Tim. Thank you for sharing that. And remember, audience members, we have like 54 people here. If you guys have questions for our wonderful guests, by all means, I have more. I'm happy to keep chatting with them. But if you guys have questions that you're curious about, please let us know. Oh, the slider's here now. The slider will tell you what to do, which is ask questions. So something else that I wanted to talk about is, was there anything that surprised any of you about like fictionalizing or dramatizing your own identity and then portraying it? Something that you didn't expect when you went into the process? River, you're nodding.
Yeah.
Let's hear from you.
I think something that I didn't expect was less about when it was actually happening and more about like afterwards, especially like I felt like when Ponyboi came out in 2019, I was so excited to go to all the festivals, to just yap, talk about my trauma, talk about being intersex, talk about all this like stuff that I hadn't talked about before. And then in 2020, with the pandemic also, forcing me to just kind of be more internal in general, I just kind of realized how I didn't give myself the space to reflect really on what that meant to make a movie about these intimate parts of myself, and then to just like be talking about it all the time. And I felt suddenly like so exposed and so like, oh my God, what did I do? And like kind of like some shame crept in, and like kind of like embarrassed, like, oh my God, did I really like do all of that? And in the past year, I've really been working through a lot of about what that all meant really for me to to just do all that. So I guess if I were to have given myself some advice, like in the festival circuit, would just be to like, or to anybody who's making work like, you know, that's of a personal nature, is just to realize, or to not get, it's exciting, and it's, you know, especially like if your film's doing well, yeah, and validating, but it also can feel a little bit objectifying, and to kind of like check yourself a little bit of when are you objectifying yourself, and when are you, not that I'm saying that I ever like sold myself out or anything, like, but it's a very fine line, but it's psychologically and emotionally something that I guess I just didn't consider until time had elapsed.
That makes sense. Tim and Ricki, any responses to this? Things that surprised you about portraying yourself?
That's powerful, River. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. There's one or two things. I'll share just this one thing that feels interesting to me that I haven't thought about before, which is just that something strange happened with me in writing and portraying this character. I think I always try to do art projects that feel transformative in some sort of way, because I can't control what will happen once they're done. I don't know if they'll get an award or a lot of money. I have learned by now, most likely neither. But I can't quite control where it goes. So I want the experience of doing it to be transformative and meaningful to me on its own. And I found often while writing this character, because my character's name is Charlie, and in many ways he feels a lot like me, even though the external aspects of his life are very different than mine. But I found something that when I would write this character or portray him, I could access a certain level of truth that I probably was not allowing myself to access regularly as myself. So I would write something for this character fictionally, and then sort of look at it and have a lot of feelings about what I had just written. And then I think I would process that personally for myself in a slower way. So it sort of allowed me access to how I was feeling in a roundabout fashion, because it was fiction. And that was powerful to me because I think I used it to try to transform myself. And look, it worked.
Ricki, what about you?
Yeah. I think that both Tim and River really touched upon something that I resonated with as well, because for our recent project, when we were working on the retreat for my character B, we wrote so that B has an opportunity to release a lot of anger and frustration. And by doing this, we set out to shoot this at a location called the Rage Cage in Brooklyn. And I don't know if anyone's ever been to one of those places, but it is a great place to let out some anger. If you're
like one of those places where you can destroy stuff, like they'll put you in like a plexiglass room.
Yes.
Okay.
They'll put you in a plexiglass room. They'll give you dishes. They'll give you old computer parts, and you can just smash things. And I got this question a lot from the other crew members and the other actors after we filmed, like, what was I channeling? What was I thinking? And I realized that as I was portraying this character who has a lot of frustration built up and pent up, that I was also dealing, I as the actress was dealing with something really similar. And with what was such a very challenging and exciting project being the retreat, and wearing so many hats to see this production, this series come to fruition. It felt like a lot of excitement, thrill, and pressure, but also exhaustion and frustration with the industry. And that, like, and I think you talked about this earlier, Bree, but like that we have that we're here because of those reasons, because we feel left out and overlooked and underrepresented. And so in that moment, they asked me this so many questions, like, what was I channeling? But I was really channeling all of the exhaustion that I've had working in this industry for so long, and the frustration that I had with having to, in some ways, bring myself to such a vulnerable and like a vulnerable and really like sensitive place in order to convey through my character that this is I'm wearing so many hats right now, and I love what I do, but there is so much work to be done, and all the exhaustion that was in working in this industry, and that took all the blood, sweat, and tears to get to where I am now. So it was a lot of different things that I was feeling during the time, and I
like a great catharsis.
It was. I let that out with that bat. I had, you guys should check it out.
I'm excited. I've heard of those places. I've never gotten to go, but now you're like, oh man, I got to go to one of those places. Okay, so we actually got some questions from our audience. So the first one I want to do, since obviously we've been talking a lot about like writing authentically, we've got a question from Jerica Long, who asks, how do you write your truth on the page without judgment? And I assume they're mentioning, judgment for oneself. So what is that process been like for the three of you? Or do you? And would you like advice from each other on how to write?
I mean, I think that's something I'm still figuring out. And I think, the more I listen to other writers and how their process, not just in film, but like, in all writers, it seems like it's something that we are constantly having to like triumph over, the fear of ourselves, of being seen. How do you write your truth on the page without judgment? How do I do it? Oh, I guess sometimes it's like about one line and one breath at a time and one page at a time. Like sometimes what's helped me is like thinking about small increments and how can I be truthful in just this one page or just this one in one session. Because often what scares me about writing is just like thinking of the largeness of it all and thinking like, well, how can I do the whole thing? But sometimes that kind of future tripping isn't what's required. What's required is just kind of like, similar to acting, be there moment to moment. And how can you do that in your writing in terms of just being present for what the story needs, as opposed to what you want it to be or what the industry wants it to be or what society wants it to be? Like, how can you just like focus in on just like, okay, in this world right now, what needs to happen next? And that's kind of helped, but
very one foot in front of the other kind of advice. Like, don't worry about the finish line, just get to that next milestone.
Exactly.
Yeah. My truth includes judging myself harshly and feeling very judged, so it's not too challenging to just
it's not a separate
wrap
aspect.
it right in there.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot for me is kind of what Tim was talking about giving yourself permission to explore the most vulnerable parts of yourself on the page. And that is not an easy thing to do. And I think, to River's point, that is something that you will continue to, as a creator, struggle with, battle with, and hopefully overcome little by little with each project that you do. So it is incredibly challenging. But I think the more you do it, like with anything, the more you allow yourself to be okay with where you came from and who you are. And like Tim said, judge yourself. That is also a part of the script too, in ways that you're just like, I cannot believe that I'm so, I'm caught up in this, or, whatever the case is. But I think that it is exploring all of these things and like not limiting yourself when it comes to like trying to grab onto that freedom to be sensitive and vulnerable in every script that you can.
I would also say therapy is probably going to help a little bit. So yeah, since no one else said it, therapy might help. That's like just like a separate thing that'll probably help you in more ways. But I felt I should probably mention it. All right, so we've got another question from Carla S. It's a two-part question. So the first part is, for those of you who have written roles for yourself that are based on your own experience, are they or are a heightened version of you? What was the process for playing that role and maintaining some distinction between yourself and the character? So I know, Tim, you kind of already talked about how like in some ways, like not having the distinction was helpful because you got to learn through him. But I'm curious for the three of you, how are you balancing the heightened version of yourself without losing yourself to them? Because usually characters have to make more dramatic or selfish decisions than we as actual humans would be making. So how are you navigating that?
It's hard. Well, it's what I said before. It's funny because to some extent it's personally helpful to like blur that line, and then at other times it's really required to have that line. But I don't have a real answer to that except for like, yeah, I hear that. I hear you, Carla, very much.
Well, I think what I would offer is that I genuinely, I'm one of the writers that I feel like a little bit of myself is in every character that I write. So while the circumstances may not be something that is purely imaginative, that we felt like we wanted to see this character's arc go from or start at one place and end up in another that I've never experienced, I do feel that like bits and pieces of myself are a part of the character's origin, like the character, whether it's the characteristics or the background. Like I find that we pour, in some characters a little bit more than others, but I think that it's accepting that it is accepting that, yeah, this character comes from a place or an experience inside, like that I've experienced, or a place in me that I have wanted to explore, and then building on that, and then that's where you continue to get to be really creative and come up with like really, I guess, unfamiliar circumstances.
Or familiar sensations.
Exactly. Yes. And in those moments is when you can play, well, this is what I would do in this circumstance. And then you could also say, well, I've experienced this. This is what I can bring to the table. Now, and that goes for when you're imagining the character, but also when you're portraying the character.
Great. River, what about you?
I would definitely have to agree with Ricki. It's a lot about like just mixing and matching and being fluid about just those different dimensions that are all intersecting all at once, and sometimes being okay with like not knowing where the impulse comes from, and just like trying to be as present as possible to what's just happening like in the present. Sometimes what's helped me is like kind of like forgetting a lot about myself, and like even if it was like this character is based on me, or this is like, I wrote this, I created this whole set around me, like this all came from my mind. Like when you're on set, it's like, okay, I just have to just kind of throw it all away and forget that, that was all constructed, and then just remember to just like, there's a character that is here, that is present in me, that just is asking to be here, and just to be there with that character even though it's you, but not you, and it's real and not real. It's a trip. It's a trip. Acting is crazy. Acting is crazy. Acting a character that is based on you is crazy. But that's also part of the fun in it, you know, because I part of the reason why I like making work based on myself or my life is just like that's what I know best because I lived it, and also I think I find it interesting because I think the work that I find most interesting in other people is when, you know, it has a seedling of a real life experience, because it means that it means you really cared about yourself or the people around you or what you've been through or what you're trying to figure out. So yeah, it's challenging for sure.
But it sounds like the adventure of figuring out how to navigate those things are some of the most rewarding parts of getting to do this.
Totally.
All right, so we're nearing the end. So the last question that I wanted to ask is to put some positivity into the world. Can you guys tell me a little bit about maybe some heartwarming messages of support or interactions with people as a result of your portrayals that you've had experiences in? Any heartwarming tales of like, wow, thank you for, you know, showing us on screen, things like that. Any nice moments to leave us with?
I've had many people come out to me on Instagram, like full on, like from different countries, just being like, because I saw you, I had the guts to tell my family, like, and that to me is just like wild, like just like how and I think that's just like the beauty of like film, especially in this digital age where like you could put something online and then like people are just watching it. And you know, because that's like actual change. Like you're literally changing somebody's mind and changing somebody's heart, and then they in turn are changing other people's because they learn something about themselves and then sharing that. So it's just like it's incredible that you'll never be able to quantify how you've actually changed people, because it's just like those are the people that message me. I wonder how many people didn't message me and then just, you know, felt things and change their lives around.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Ricki, do you have any experiences like that?
Yeah, I'd say with the retreat, because we successfully created a series that was developed entirely with an all Black women cast and crew. We have received so many like positive reactions and like heartfelt responses to the show. And I think what we set out to do, in addition to create representation, was to build a network so that we can recommend and suggest a Black woman DP should we ever need to get more work and more opportunity, or a Black woman gaffer, or a Black woman sound mixer, in addition to Black women actresses and producers, and building that network so that we can continue to work on in the industry is like that has been so amazing. Especially every time someone comes to me and is like, I need a Black woman who is a cinematographer. Do you have any recommendations? And I'm like, yes, I do. Here are all the people that I can recommend to you. And I highly recommend them. And so that has really changed so much for me as a creator. And it is definitely something that we prioritize and will be prioritizing with my film production company, Nuanse Entertainment, going forward.
That's wonderful. And Tim, any heartwarming messages that you've gotten?
Yeah, the same, whether it's messages on Instagram or emails or people coming up to us after screenings, or when I used to do live storytelling shows, people coming up after that. And the main takeaway that I've always noticed is whenever I tell or whenever we tell a story that I don't think anyone else will understand, there's always somebody who comes up to me and says, "Thank you so much. I didn't think anyone else understood that." It's always the case. And I think that's really important to remember.
Yeah, I think the most heartwarming comments I get on work is just when somebody comments #mood, and I'm like, okay, thank God, I'm not the only one. Like, it's so simple, but like that one moment, you just like, you feel a kinship to this total stranger, and you're like, oh, okay, great. I'm so glad we had this experience together. And speaking of, I'm so glad that the four of us have had this experience together. Thank you so much for giving us your time, for giving us permission to hear your wonderful stories, for sharing them. All of your work is being currently linked in the comments section, and will of course be linked in the description if you're watching this as a video on demand. So thank you so much to all three of you for giving us your time today and for making work that is so special, both for you, it sounds like, and for the rest of us. And if you, anyone in the audience is looking to attend other Seed&Spark events, there's going to be a little video at the very end of this, so I'm not even going to stay on screen. So thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. Thank you once again to our three wonderful panelists. Follow them on social, watch their work on YouTube and wherever else it exists, and keep telling your stories, because the only way that we're going to see more interesting work is if we take power into our own hands, stop asking permission, and just do it. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.